Welcome to the Ephesiology podcast, a podcast dedicated to the study of the early Christian movement and its implications for the church today. Today, we're with Michael, our resident ephesiologist, and I'm Matt Till in the suburban sprawl of Chicago, Illinois. And today we have something special. Michael was actually a special guest on another podcast recently, and we're going to have an opportunity to replay that on the topic of really this notion of the importance of theology in discipling your kids. Now, Michael, that sounds like kind of scary, the word theology.
I know, doesn't it? It can be intimidating to parents to think that there's some aspect of theology in how we engage our children with the topics of the Bible and so on. And so, yeah, I was happy to be on a podcast with Kyle Bartholic, who's the pastor of discipleship at Christ Community Church in Ames, Iowa. And we had a wonderful time talking about that role that theology plays in discipling our children, but also trying to take the fear out of it. I mean, it's one thing for people like us who have been trained theologically to talk about theology with our children. For others, it can be a little bit intimidating.
Well, I can't wait for us to be able to listen in and dig in this material with you. So without further delay, here is Michael's interview.
Want to talk here a little bit, as we've talked so far, theology matters. What I believe about God matters because it informs my identity. Belief corresponds in behavior. And the way that I've always said it to teenagers is that if I claim to be a cheeseburger, I need to act like a cheeseburger, right? And then we always get into this discussion of the sentient nature of cheeseburgers and are they really living beings, and all those wonderful philosophical, the metaphysical nature and the existential nature of cheeseburgerness, But it helps. I think it's a silly image, but it helps us to put into practice or to conceptualize that, what I actually believe gets fleshed out in my life. And John talks about this in his letters. Right? Little children claim to be in Jesus, walk as he walked. There's a moral component. James talks about it. The proof is in the pudding. Faith without works is dead. So we know that, and I think we know that with our hearts, or we know that in our heads, and that's why theology matters. But you talked about this for you and Lori. We have so many, as parents, we have so many other things to do. We have so many other important things. And again, you talk about this for you and Lori, that you guys built in some rhythms, some structures, and some boundaries to say, doing theology as a family, living out our theology as a family, our belief corresponds to behavior is really important. So we're going to set up some practical boundaries for that. So what were some of the other important things that you guys had to fight against? And how did you even just go about that? For you and Lori as a couple, how did you go about setting those priorities and those boundaries as you're raising, your kids?
Yeah, I think one of the important things for us was that our kids were always included in everything we did. And we were very deliberate in helping them to feel like they were included in the things that we were doing. That whether that would be at our local church. I can remember, we had a home group at our home, and our kids were young, and this was an adult group. But I can remember sitting around the dinner table the night or the evening of our home group, and our kids would be talking about, when is our group going to start? They owned that because we included them in that sense that, this is a part of who we are as Coopers. We do this. We gather together with like-minded believers, and we study God's word. And so that was always important for us. There were occasions when we had to confront issues, cultural issues. One such occasion was when our youngest son was in, I think, the third grade, and the teacher started practicing yoga at the beginning of the class day. And our son came home, and I can remember we were sitting out in our backyard. Actually, we were lying down in our backyard looking up at the geese flying over. And he said, that they started practicing yoga and at school. And I said, well, Christopher, what do you think about that? And he said, well, Daddy, I don't want to practice yoga. And I said, great. Well, let's think about how then we can address that with your teacher.
Yeah.
And and so we did. I wrote her a letter and explained the religious connection with yoga and so on, and we
Yeah.
were able to address that in their public school, and so they ceased practicing yoga altogether at that school.
Okay.
So again, we were always including them, and
Yeah.
and it was just such a joy to be able to come home from long trips and listen to our kids ask inquisitive questions about what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and see them really think in terms of, wow, we've been a part of this.
Yeah.
It's just not Daddy going out to
Yeah.
wherever country, but it's us participating with him because we're praying for him. We're interested in what he's doing, and we
Yeah.
want to do those things. And
Yeah.
that's resulted in 3 adult children who have a deep passion for missions.
Mm-hmm.
They're very much engaged in their communities and their churches, and they all 3 have an eye to getting to the mission field
Awesome.
as a result. And I know that's not every parent's desire for a child to leave home and go to the mission field, but
Yeah.
for us, because that's who we are,
Yeah.
we're just absolutely thrilled that they continue to have that passion.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said. I mean, again, it's pausing and responding to those moments. Again, and for you, right, Michael, it's with your job, with your vocation, with your calling is in missions, and then even getting a chance to go and speak and be in other places as a university professor, right? Getting to take your kids along with you and having
Yeah,
those conversations.
sure.
But I've watched other parents do this. We don't have to go to conferences, or we don't have to be pastors or professional Christians in order to have these conversations. I'm out scooping the snow, shoveling the sidewalk, and I have my kids alongside of me, and I go, hey, let's go do our neighbor's sidewalk. Well, Dad, why would we
Right.
do that?
Yeah.
We're done. We're finished. Well, yeah, but because we love Jesus, he calls us to serve other people. That's a part of who we are. We go out of our way to serve and to take care of. And so even this act of
Mhm.
shoveling the snow can become an act of ministry, and it's where we model for our kids. It's not just the right
Exactly.
sociological thing to do to be a good neighbor. It's motivated out of our love for Christ. And so when I'm with my kids, I love those moments of just harnessing those, those small moments where we can go. And so it doesn't have to be just traveling to other countries or being a professional
Mhm.
Christian that happens, but it happens in our daily lives. Why do we go out of our way? Dad, or, Mom or Dad, why were you patient in the grocery store when I could tell that you were frustrated? Well, it's
Mm,
because as a Christian, Jesus is making me and helping me to be a patient person, and so I
yeah,
respond in those moments, right? And so, yeah, I so value that, appreciate that as you're highlighting
yeah,
that, and we can just encourage parents to seize those little moments that make a massive difference. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if for us, just having the mindset that every moment is a discipleship moment
mm,
wherever we are. If it's around the dinner table, which we were faithful throughout our kids growing up years, that we always had dinner together.
yeah,
Whether it were in our backyard, like you said, shoveling our neighbor's drive, whether it was driving in the car to or from school or wherever. Those are all moments, all discipleship opportunity moments. And again, as you referenced, our kids see what we do. And
yeah,
for us to be aware of our actions that do have an impact on the future of our children, and to think about those things. I mean, yeah, so many different memories pop into my mind about trying to live those things out, so that our kids not just not legalistically, so our
yeah,
kids see it, but really trying to live that out as a disciple and a follower of Christ, knowing that our kids are watching and that it will impact their future.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. Again, drawing and not drawing off that legalistic side that we must do this, right? Because that's that performance gospel. And
Mm,
it's the gospel that says, if I do this, God will do that.
right.
And the biblical gospel, the scriptural gospel is that, well, I couldn't do anything. Right.
Yeah.
I had nothing to offer God. Paul tells us in Ephesians and in Romans that so that no man would boast. Right. It is a gift of grace. And so I wasn't anything desirable when God sought me out, when God pursued me, sent his son to die for
Mm.
me, had the Holy Spirit crying out that truth to me, and crying out to all humanity. Um, but we've got to steer away from that legalistic gospel that because I do these things, right? And there's that grace and that freedom in that. Now
Yeah.
again, as
And,
you
and
have,
it,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say it needs to come out of who we are, where our identity is in Christ, as we live that out.
Yeah,
And I think a part of that is living out what it means to um, be that Galatians 5 person that we were talking about earlier.
yeah, yeah,
If we are experiencing the fruit of the Spirit, we do experience love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self control.
yeah,
And that results in certain ways in which we behave.
yeah,
And and that behavior is observable
yeah.
by our children. And yeah, so
Yeah. So our belief must correspond in right in correlative behavior, right? So what we
absolutely.
actually our behavior, or another way to say it is our behavior actually exposes what we really believe.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant way to put it.
So it's not it's not just the things that we actually do, right? So you talked about being in a small group and your kids owning that, and practical conversations that you were just present and available to have, with your kids as they were growing up and the things that they were going through. So those are some of the things that we do, but it's also the things that we don't do. Now, your daughter, she's a pretty accomplished in archery, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen some social media posts of her
Right.
shooting archery in the back in the backyard, and
Yep. Yep.
so I'm sure you and Lori have come up against different things that you've had to say, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're setting some priorities. Walk me through the process for you guys, how you did that, or how you set those boundaries, or what were just some of the things that you had to say no to as a family.
Yeah. That's such a great question. Boy, Lori would be great on this podcast because I think probably she would have more to contribute in this area than I would because I'm not a no person.
Yeah,
Always. It seems like I'm always yes. Let's try this and see what happens. And of course, our kids' involvement in different sports
hmm,
has been a part of that. Lori and I, we love Europe. We spent a lot of
hmm,
time in Europe, and so naturally we were excited about soccer, and so all of our kids
yeah,
played soccer rather than other sports. Um, but I think more than anything, it was our excitement for them being a part of other things that were outside of the church.
okay,
Um, but also were opportunities for us as a family to be engaged in the community, so that we could be a witness
yeah,
to others, and so that was important for us. And we did that a lot through sports. We did it through various school activities, and so we were very much involved in those things at our kids' school. Parent conferences, but also different functions at the school. And so we wanted to model what it looked like to be good Christians as we engaged in those things. And
yeah,
we were involved in our community as well, in a public way,
yeah.
um, being a part of different boards in our community and so on. Again, always with that thought of, we want to model what it looks like to be a Christ follower in these contexts, not specifically for our children, but for our community as well.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I mean, again, all of this is should never be thought of in legalistic terms,
Yeah.
but should really emerge out of who we are as followers of Christ, and that I think is critical for us.
Yeah, I love that. The one word you said was, it was enjoy that experience together. That's
Mhm.
something I've heard. I mean, just in this conversation, that maybe that's a theme that in our entire hour that we've been talking here is just that there's this enjoyment of God, right? When we do theology, when we learn about God, we come to enjoy Him, and then as parents, as we are first enjoying God, then we can hand that enjoyment of God off to our kids.
Yeah.
One of the ways that I've heard it say is that you can't give Jesus away if you haven't put Jesus in, right?
Mm,
There needs to be an inflow of Jesus in your life, in your heart, in your mind, before there can be an overflow of Jesus. And so that enjoyment of pursual, and in the pursuit of God personally, overflows to the enjoyment of God with my kids, but then just enjoying them and the experiences that you have, and
yeah.
living your beliefs out, that practical application of theology, that if I believe this, I'm going to respond that way. And like you said, we can only do that when we are involved in our community. And there's an importance to being even involved in the public life of our community, sports, theater, whatever those activities might be. But again, hearing what you said, is that prioritization of, I carry myself first and foremost as a Christian in this arena, not
Mhm.
just the goal to be an accomplished musician or athlete or any of those things, but how do I interact in this world as a Christian? That really is a theological discussion, right?
It is. Yeah, it is. And it is not, I don't want to give anybody any illusion that we did this perfectly. Um, our family,
Yeah, yeah,
as five, are probably some of the most competitive people that we know. We like to win, whether it's
yep.
sports or games or whatever, and we've shed many tears around the Monopoly board, playing together, and other games as the kids were young. But still, I think even in those times of intense sport competition, even opportunities that were presented to us as a result of failure were great places for us to model. What does it look like to be a Christian and fail at a sport, or not perform well? And what does it look like to come alongside of each other
Hmm.
when one of us is down because we failed at what we were trying to achieve? And those are equally important times in the lives of parents and
Yeah,
their children. Yeah, I think the one thing that came to my mind as you were talking, Kyle, was that we wanted to be, and we still are, students of our children. We really want to know them,
yeah,
and especially, well, not especially now, but in continuing even into their adulthood, we want to know their passions, what animates them,
yeah,
what excites them about life, and so on, and think about ways in which we can encourage that and foster it even more
yeah.
deeply. So I said this recently to a friend that our kids are really our best disciples, and more
Mm,
than anybody in the world, I would much rather be with our three kids in a missions context than with
mm,
anybody else, because I know what they believe, I know who they are, I know how they react in different ways,
yeah.
and yeah, I think those are important things for us as parents.
Yeah, I appreciate just what you said there, is just continually being students of our kids, right?
Mhm.
The disciple making work is never done. The parenting work is never done. You're
Yeah,
always
we
be
thought we
parents.
thought it would be done, but no, it's
you you know you
you know what?
operate.
I'm glad that it's not, because
Yeah,
it changes. It definitely
yeah.
changes. I mean,
Hmm.
Lori and I are much more friends with our three now than we
Yeah,
were, of course, when they were growing up. And boy, that is so much fun. I mean, we
yeah,
get the biggest kick out of each other now, more so than we ever have. And it's just fun to be adults together and play
yeah.
together.
Yeah.
lap and, all of those things.
Yeah, no, you're so right. It changes through each stage and it needs to change. If I'm parenting the same way, if I'm parenting my teenager the same way I parented my 5-year-old, it's not going to go well. And if I'm parenting my 25-year-old the same way I parented my 15-year-old, it's probably not going to go well, right? So through those stages of parenting, it changes, but parenting never stops, right? Alongside of discipleship. Discipleship never stops because we don't stop being discipled as individuals. We don't stop growing in our likeness of Jesus until we meet him in eternity and we realize the fullness of his glory. On this side of heaven, we're always growing in his likeness. And so I appreciate that word, just of how that as parents we should again just enjoy and experience our kids, be students of our kids, and in that learning about them, continue pointing them towards Jesus.
Yeah. And for us now, we're at the stage where our kids speak into our lives. And
Yeah.
boy, that's really fun. To go to them because we know that they're mature believers. They're walking with the Lord.
Yep.
We have the same passion as a family. To go to them and say, you know what, I need prayer for a decision I need to make, and this is
Yeah.
the decision. And would you just pray for me? And
Yeah.
wow, it's just super cool.
Yeah, that and just the one, not only as you said, the enjoyment of that, receiving that, engaging with your kids in that way, but what a gift from you and Lori to allow your kids to speak into your life, right? So into that young adult stage of life to say, hey, what do you think about this? Like that's such a gift to your kids, to show them and to model for them what you actually think about them, right? We only ask we only ask people that we think are important to us, people who are important to us. We ask their opinions, we ask for their advice, for their input, and so handing that to your kids is such a gift. Great job on that. I mean, just encourage you there. So yeah, you're a student of culture, and so as we've talked about theology, doing theology, some of the voices we should listen to. What are some things that we as Christians should be weary of when we are stepping into culture, when we are looking at our world around us, that we should be really cautious? We don't want to create, we don't want cognitive dissonance. We don't want to try to marry two incompatible belief systems, right? And so when we do theology, when we learn about God, that calls us back to this foundation, right? And should call us back to what God believes and thinks. But what are just as you're looking at our world, what are some things that we should be weary of or we should be hesitant of?
The world is not a unique place. We see repeated over and over again throughout history three major themes, and we're certainly seeing that in glaring perspective in our day to day. But the world has historically experienced political, economic, and societal turmoil. Or unrest, and that I think really describes where we are today. And to navigate those with our young people, I think, is so important. I think I would. It would be interesting. It would have been interesting for our children to be younger than they are now, because we navigate these things in different ways with them today than we would probably when they were smaller. But the one thing I think that's important is for us as parents not to shy away from those issues. They hear about what's going on in the world, whether it's while they're sitting watching the news with you, or listening to you talk with other adult friends or your spouse, or they're hearing it from their teachers or school children who might not have the same values as your family has. Children are aware of the political and the economic and the societal unrest that we're experiencing today. And so I think it's important for us to identify those and begin to speak into them our values and how we would go about navigating those things, and what it looks like for us to call ourselves Christians in those particular contexts. So Yeah, this is and even for us as adults,
Yeah.
uh, we need to walk through these things in community together with others and not
Yeah.
allow us to be isolated as we're thinking about how to address these, and to allow multiple voices into
Mm.
these contexts too, so that we have a good understanding of how to respond. I think as I think about um, what's happening in our world today, I mean, obviously, we see the tensions that have surrounded this last election cycle.
Hmm.
We're experiencing the pandemic as well
Yeah.
as people continue to fall ill to COVID-19, and we're seeing increased tensions in our society through racial relations.
Hmm.
um, I think the encouragement here is the same as what John gave to those seven churches in the Book of Revelation, because the entire Book of Revelation is kind of outlining this political, economic, and societal unrest that's
Yeah.
happening in Asia at the time, but is going to happen continually throughout history. And John's encouragements were in two ways.
Hmm.
His encouragement was in two ways. One is that we need to endure through these times,
Yeah.
that we need to remain followers of Christ and live like Christ. And
Yeah.
then secondly, we need to stay on mission and and actively engage in that mission, because ultimately that mission will be completed. And John paints that beautiful picture of what that looks like when every people, nation, language, tribe stands before the throne of God
Yeah.
and is in
Yeah.
worship of Him. And we shouldn't lose sight of that,
Yeah.
even in these times of unrest. And what a beautiful opportunity to disciple our young people through this.
Yeah.
That even though we don't understand completely what's going on, that we're seeing all this fighting that's happening between people who call themselves Christians.
Hmm.
We're still called to stay on that mission, and John beautifully outlines what that is. That
Yeah.
we're to stand up for the faith, we're to defend the faith,
Yeah.
we're to stand in the gap for the marginalized,
Yeah.
and we're to continue to proclaim the gospel.
Yeah.
And this is, I just think this is an incredible discipleship opportunity for parents to have with their children.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I love that. As you know, this in Revelation, one of the big thematic lines that gets tied to the whole book, and really as apocalyptic literature as a whole, as a genre, is this idea of hope. And
Mm,
what is our final hope actually rooted in as believers? And as you read Revelation, it's not in kings, it's
yeah,
not in kingdoms, it's not in societies, it's not even in systems or structures that man puts in place. In fact, Revelation paints a very poor picture of those things, right? Those are all going to
yeah,
fade. Who is the only one that's going to save us? And that's Jesus. Who is the only one that's going to have final victory? That's Jesus, right? When he comes back. And so, and this is even ties back, and we could wax poetically, but that even ties back to the prophets of the Old Testament, especially the minor prophets. Nahum specifically is theocentric in his message. Who is going to save you, Israel?
mm,
God. God is the only one that can save you. It's not in the reestablishment of your kingdom necessarily. It's not in your political systems or any of that stuff. It is God exclusively. And so I love that word there, that we need to stay focused on Jesus, and just in that proclamation of Revelation, that as we walk through these turbulent times. One, this isn't a unique experience for us.
no,
It
it's
might
not.
be unique for you and me because we live in limited time spans, but it's not unique for humanity. And the church has been wrestling with issues like this for a long, long time, and their answer has been exclusively keep Jesus at the center, and follow all that he teaches. And so again, it goes back to our very first, as we started this conversation, what is theology? It is
Mm,
the study of God. It's me getting to know God more and more, so that transforms my mind. And as my mind is transformed, my behavior, the way that I live, is transformed. So,
Yeah.
Michael, thanks
Amen.
for joining us on this in this conversation here. And so again, just deeply appreciate your voice and your influence in the church as a whole, and especially in my life, and for Danielle and I personally, your voice over years of friendship and being one of our professors. So thanks for joining me today.
Thanks. That's encouraging. It's been great to be with you.
Well, thanks for doing theology in community with us today here on the Ephesiology podcast. You can learn more about ephesiology and our growing global ephesiology community at ephesiology.com. Also, to learn more about upcoming courses and even resources for you as a parent as you look to disciple your children in the ways of Jesus and to live on mission. Continue to get other free resources as well for you and your church and your leadership teams. Again, that's found at ephesiology.com. So for Michael and myself, we'll talk again next week right here on the Ephesiology podcast.